3:15 a.m. in eastern Syria feels like a held breath. The moonless sky presses down on broken wadis and abandoned compounds that look the same in every direction. A Marine rifle platoon from 1st Battalion, 7th Marines moves low and careful. Then the planned L-shaped ambush snaps open along the ridge. Blowing sand turns vision into guesswork, while terrain masking chops radios into short pall. Nervous bursts. Rounds rake the wadi lip, and rocket-propelled grenades probe for movement. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, the Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller, works the net through static and strain. Up above, Major Aaron Checklist Carter of the United States Air Force holds in the pattern in her A-10C Thunderbolt II after an administrative risk label put her on a tight leash. She listens for anything she can build into action and keeps her breathing even. A fractured 9-line trickles in, and she starts to rebuild it piece by piece. Friendlies are to the southwest by roughly 80 meters. Enemy is dug along the ridgeline with a machine gun and rockets. Mark is by infrared. And the egress will be west. It is night, so Type 2 control applies, and the JTAC owns the clearance. With danger close tied to the commander's initials. She states a safe final attack, heading, confirms restrictions, and keeps the fire geometry pushing fragments away from the Marines. Cockpit habits steady her hands as the dust shivers the jet. Master arm to arm. IP inbound on the north to south run. In hot, a short walk of GAU, 8 fire that snaps and stops. Then off dry, with the nose lifting toward clean air and a westbound egress. Her fingers find the folded checklist like a touchstone. The screen goes black on that feeling of control and courage. And the promise that skill can keep people alive. Major Aaron Checklist Carter flies the A-10C Thunderbolt II as a flight lead in the United States Air Force. She is known for calm, methodical work and triple checks that some call slow, though her timing is steady and sure. Tonight she holds in the pattern over a forward operating base under an administrative risk note, while higher headquarters labels the ambush as minor harassment. In the cockpit she moves with quiet precision. Hands light, eyes patient, thoughts clear. Her folded checklist sits under her left glove like a small anchor in a moving world. She breathes, reads back details, and confirms restrictions before every move. Then builds trust, one correct call at a time. IP inbound. In hot. And egress, west, are not drama to her. They are the rails that carry people home. She respects the Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller, who owns the control type and the clearance. And she aligns her plan to that authority. Earlier in her career, a target grid failed to fit what her gut knew. She paused to verify, while others pressed. And that disciplined pause prevented friendly fire. The save never made a headline. But the weight of that near fratricide lives in her hands each time she sets master arm to arm. She is a major. A flight lead in a hog callsign flight. And she shapes geometry that sends rounds away from friendlies on every run. Some once mocked her caution. Yet, after action, reports carry her name in lines that never leave a vault. She flies without bravado, centered on the human cost that makes her procedures sacred. And she is ready to turn discipline into mercy when the next call arrives. The night on the ground feels grainy and close, like dust under the eyelids and grit on the tongue. A Marine rifle platoon from 1st Battalion, 7th Marines threads through broken wadis and abandoned compounds with heads low and rifles level. Blowing sand turns the world into a chalk smear, while terrain masking chews radios into clipped syllables. Squads, pause. Pass hand signals. And push on in pairs. Feet finding the hard ground by memory. The ambush snaps open in an L along the high ground and the near wall of a wadi. Machine gun fire from PKM positions scythes the open angles and ricochets slap stone and dirt. Rocket-propelled grenades search the depression like slow punches. stepping rounds toward any hint of movement. Men drop into what cover exists, count breaths, and wait for the short green life of a transmission. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, United States Marine Corps, works the net through static that rises and falls with the terrain. He pushes fragments of a 9-line, marks friendlies with infrared, and talks the aircraft onto the correct ridgeline without losing track of the men at his feet. The platoon commander, First Lieutenant Jason Reed, scans the ridge and does the math as casualties increase. A medical evacuation corridor stays contested while the overhead stack runs thin, because fast movers are near bingo fuel. Keep the picture clear. Friendlies are oriented southwest of the ridge, in broken cover that limits lines of sight. Enemy holds the high ground and uses it well, with cut lanes and overlapping positions that make movement costly. Radios fail for simple reasons, like rock, distance, and sand. So every clean word matters. The stakes rise with every clipped burst. And what the Marines need is precise, disciplined close air support that helps instead of harms. Static rides, the headset like gravel, as the cockpit glows a muted red. A broken 9-line leaks through from Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, pinned near a wadi, with radios cutting in and out. Major Aaron Checklist Carter steadies her breath and lets the fragments line up in her mind. She hears the pieces, not the noise, and begins to build. She runs talk on to confirm friendlies to the southwest at roughly 80 meters. Enemy positions along the ridgeline, and mark by infrared. She sets a final attack heading window that pushes rounds away from Marines and plans an egress west. Night and dust hold the fight in Type 2, and the Joint Terminal Attack Controller owns the control type and the clearance. Danger close will require the commander's initials before anything leaves the jet. Her hands move with precise economy as habits click into place without show. EGI aligned. DSMS confirmed. Master arm to arm. Pack available. Laser safe. Rockets set to APKWS. Guns, short burst. Option, ready for later. She touches the folded checklist at her knee like a small ritual of order. She keeps the geometry in her head and the people on the ground in her heart. Brevity stays clean and simple because clean words save lives. IP inbound prepares the run and sets the stack to listen for effects. In hot is a promise of control, not a license to rush. Off dry is ready if clearance does not come or if the picture is not safe. She reads back restrictions and fire support coordination measures, so nothing is left to assumption. The Joint Terminal Attack Controller listens past the static and shapes the clearance that only he can give. Carter holds her nose on the heading and her mind on the math. The jet waits on the edge of action, while the whole sky seems to hold a breath. Night dust grips the cockpit as the first run begins under Type 2 control. Major Aaron Checklist Carter steadies the A-10C Thunderbolt II and calls IP inbound while static rides the net. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, the Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller, owns the clearance with danger close and the commander's initials. Carter confirms infrared mark on the ridgeline and states friendly southwest at roughly 80 meters, so everyone shares the same picture. She builds the geometry out loud to herself and to the stack so it is clear and simple, north to south. Final attack heading near 180. Offset left to bias, the 30mm stream away from the Marines. Egress west to stay clear of the palm grove where a suspected infrared threat was called earlier. Master, arm to arm. Pack confirmed. Engine instruments steady. Rockets left set to APKWS for a precision follow-up at dawn if the anchor survives. She rolls the nose down and the world narrows to sight. Tone. And time. In hot, a brief walk of GAU-8 fire snaps along the ridge and clips the machine gun into silence without a splash near the platoon. Off-dry follows as the nose lifts and the jet slides to the west. Clean of the grove and ready to reassess. Herrera keeps the radios short and answers with effects while pairs on the ground bound through dust and broken cover. Carter breathes and resets the picture with care. She checks fuel, confirms systems, and keeps the rocket option ready while she listens for the next fragment that matters. The tone in her voice is calm because calm helps people hear. Control under pressure becomes the shape of relief as the first pass buys seconds that feel like air for men who need it. A faint tone rises in the headset, and the cockpit feels smaller in an instant. A suspected infrared-guided missile threat stirs from the northeast near a palm grove, and Major Aaron Checklist Carter responds like a metronome. She punches a disciplined flare program through the ALE-47, banks firm, and adds a quick jink to break the seeker look without losing the fight. The A-10C settles back on heading with a steady hand on the throttles and a calm scan across gauges and sky. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, the Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller, calls the threat axis and holds control of clearance while Carter mines energy and keeps the egress to the west away from the reported launch site. Fast movers in the stack are close to bingo fuel, which means the overhead picture is thin and timing matters. Carter states honest playtime, plans to push to a KC-135 after the next passes, and coordinates with her wingman to hold high cover and watch for pop-up threats. The radios stay simple and real, with standard brevity like a clean SAM call, a note on flares, and egress west, while the JTAC confirms infrared mark and friendly location. Carter protects the Marines by holding a safe altitude block and by keeping the attack geometry biased away from friendlies. She updates the final attack heading window so debris and fragments track north of the Wadi and not across the men bounding in pairs. The jet hums with the feel of checklists turned into muscle memory, and the tone stays urgent but steady. Courage here looks like clean countermeasures, smart headings, fuel discipline, and a plan that assumes the next problem is already on the way. Control returns to the cockpit, and with it, the space to help. Night still holds the field, and the air tastes like dust. Major Aaron Checklist Carter lines up the A-10C Thunderbolt II and keeps Type 2 control in effect because visibility is low. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller, owns the clearance with danger close and the commander's initials. Carter confirms a safe final attack heading that biases effects away from friendlies, keeps egress to the west, and calls visual friendlies and tally target on the ridgeline. Her cockpit flow is steady and exact. She arms the targeting pod laser, confirms the laser code with the controller, selects APKWS in the DSMS, verifies master arm to arm, and checks PAC and engine instruments. North setup is complete and the run is simple by design. She states in hot and rides the infrared mark with the nose just low enough to keep sightlines clean. The laser paints the north face of the compound corner, and the guided rockets follow it in. 2 APKWS ripple off the rails and the impacts land tight on the enemy anchor, with debris driven north of the Wadi and not across the Marines to the southwest. Radios stay simple and standard as the controller clears hot and later gives a quick battle damage assessment. Carter answers with rounds on target and continue movement while the platoon uses the opening to bound. Discipline holds the edges of the scene. She resets the jet, keeps the egress west clear of the palm grove, and watches for a second-order threat while her wingman guards high cover. The tone in her voice stays calm so everyone else can breathe. Courage shows up as clean laser-coded APKWS, smart headings, and fuel to think. Control turns chaos into chances for survival, and the next minute belongs to the men on the ground. Gray dawn eases in around 5 o'clock a.m. as the dust thins over the Wadi and shapes take on edges again. A column of red smoke marks the Marine platoon to the southwest, a clear anchor in a world that finally has contrast. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera reads the scene with care and confirms that he has visual on friendlies and on the ridgeline where the enemy machine gun sits. Major Aaron Checklist Carter looks through her sightlines and confirms the same picture. The kind of shared view that turns radio traffic into action. Carter requests Type 1 with the calm of someone who knows why the timing matters. And the Joint Terminal Attack Controller approves Type 1 with danger close and the commander's initials. Geometry gets exact, so effects go where they should. Final attack heading sits in a window of 170 to 200. Impacts are biased, north of the Wadi, and egress is planned to the west. She runs the cockpit flow without hurry or flare. Master arm to arm. Pack status confirmed. Gun selected with the standard high explosive incendiary mix on the GAU-8A. DSMS and engine instruments checked. Tally red smoke and tally target confirmed before roll-in. She sets IP inbound and then calls in hot with visual friendlies, while the controller confirms the mark and the friendly location. The tone across the net is calm and assured. The kind of quiet that often means people live. Night and dust made Type 2 the right call. But dawn and shared visual make Type 1 safe and responsible. Carter holds the nose on the ridgeline as the picture clears a little more and the math locks into place. Precision feels like a promise kept by discipline and light. Gray light slides over the Wadi and the red smoke holds steady to the southwest. Maj. Aaron, Checklist, Carter, and Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera both have visual on the Marines and the enemy gun on the ridgeline. Carter requests Type 1 and waits for the net to settle. The Joint Terminal Attack Controller approves with danger close, and the commander's initials, and the air grows very quiet inside the headset. Carter confirms master arm to arm. PAC engaged, and gun selected with a standard high explosive incendiary mix. DSMS and engine instruments are checked and steady. Tally, red smoke, and tally target are called, so the picture is shared. Final attack heading is set inside 170 to 200 with an offset that biases 30mm fire north of the Wadi. Egress is planned to the west to stay clear of earlier threat calls. She states IP inbound and then calls in hot as the Marines begin another bound. The burst is timed to land short to long along the ridge, so the stream walks away from friendlies by dozens of meters. The JTAC owns the clearance and gives cleared hot before the gun. Simple words that carry real weight. The GAU-8 speaks for a heartbeat, and then the jet lifts clean and goes off safe toward the west. Dust hangs low, and the ground goes quiet for a beat as the pursuit slows and angles break. Herrera gives a short report on effects while the platoon breathes. Confirms the gap is open, and signals that movement can continue. Carter holds altitude, watches the geometry, and keeps the egress plan honest. The scene stays intense but steady. A lesson in discipline and restraint that shows how a danger-close gun run saves lives when it is done by the book. The Marine platoon bounds by teams, slipping southwest as a pursuit element shadows the Wadi edge from the north. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, the Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller, calls the movement cleanly and keeps control on the net. With both shooter and controller holding visual, he designates Type 1 and prepares clearance for a short re-attack with guns only. Major Aaron Checklist Carter in the A-10C Thunderbolt II checks the picture against her map and reads the cues of dust, angles, and distance. She sets a safe final attack heading window nearly perpendicular to the Marines' route of travel, so the 30mm stream forms a barrier between friendlies and the pursuers. Effects are biased north of the Wadi, and the egress remains west to avoid the earlier infrared threat near the palm grove. She confirms master arm to arm, engages pack, selects gun, checks DSMS and engine instruments, and calls tally friendlies and tally target. Herrera owns the clearance, issues danger close with the commander's initials, and keeps the timeline tight so the burst lands between bounds. Carter states in hot and tips the nose to the Wadi lip, laying a brief, short to long burst that cuts the chase without throwing fragments across the Marines. The GAU-8 snaps and then falls silent as she goes off safe and slides to the west on the planned egress, while her wingman holds high cover and scans for pop-up threats. Radios remain simple and correct, as the controller delivers a quick battle damage assessment and confirms the gap is open. Focus stays professional. The geometry is clean, and the ground fight bends just enough for the platoon to keep moving. Major Errand checklist: Carter checks fuel state with a steady voice, while the Marine platoon settles behind cover after the second gun pass. She flies an A-10C Thunderbolt II and keeps numbers honest. Computing bingo and writing the margin, she refuses to cross. If troops in contact holds, she will push one more short pass. Then plan to meet a KC-135 or KC-10 for fuel. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, the Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller, maintains control of clearance and reports that the medical evacuation corridor remains contested. Overhead help is thin because fast movers in the stack are near bingo fuel and the timeline keeps shrinking. Carter coordinates with her wingman to hold high cover, scan for pop-up threats, and be ready to check in if she must depart. Her decision-making sounds like a calm list rather than a speech, a form of disciplined risk acceptance that leaves room for surprises. She confirms a final short pass can be flown inside fuel margins, sets a safe attack, heading that biases effects away from friendlies, and keeps egress west. Engine instruments stay in limits. Master arm remains to arm. And her intention is clear that she will go dry if clearance is withheld. Herrera keeps the radios simple, owns the type of control, and gives updates in short bursts that keep everyone aligned without drama. Carter speaks intent, checks timing against the Marines' bounds, and holds the heading window that protects them while still shaping the fight. Marines first, paperwork second, but never at the cost of safety or procedure. Because courage lives inside fuel, headings, timelines, and people. She chooses quiet math over noise and keeps them alive today. Gray morning hardens over the wadi, and the dust hangs low, like breath held too long. The Marine platoon settles into position and readies another bound to the southwest. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera confirms that he and Major Aaron Checklist Carter both have visual on friendlies and on the enemy gun along the ridgeline. Carter requests Type 1 and waits while the net clears enough space for a clean decision. The Joint Terminal Attack Controller approves Type 1 and issues clearance with danger close and the commander's initials. Geometry locks in with a final attack heading window of 170 to 200, an offset that biases 30mm fire north of the wadi, and an egress west to avoid the earlier infrared threat near the palm grove. Carter verifies master arm to arm, confirms pack engaged, selects gun with the standard high explosive incendiary mix on the GAU-8A, and checks DSMS and engine instruments in one calm sweep. Tally red, smoke, and tally target are spoken, so everyone shares the same picture. She calls IP inbound, and then in hot, timing the run between Marine bounds so the short to long burst walks the ridge away from friendlies by dozens of meters. Radios stay clean and correct, with the JTAC owning the type and the clearance, and Carter stating visual friendlies and tally target. Cleared hot is given before the gun, and the GAU-8A speaks for a heartbeat. Then she goes off safe and takes the planned egress west. The ground goes quiet for a breath as dust settles and the pursuit fades. And the net carries a calm acknowledgement from First Lieutenant Jason Reed that the gap is open and his people can move. A hush where timing, geometry, and restraint have turned chaos into survival. Major Aaron Checklist Carter hands the station to her wingman and checks fuel with a steady voice. Numbers line up inside, A-10C Thunderbolt 2 limits, and she calls honest playtime. She computes bingo and plans to push to a KC-135 after transit. with a KC-10 as a backup if tasking shifts. The Marine platoon regains control of the ground, and the net sounds less tight around the edges. Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera gives a brief battle damage assessment in clean phrases. The platoon is moving. Casualties are managed. And the wadi is quiet enough for a medic to work. Carter keeps Master armed to safe for the transit and resets systems in order. She reviews DSMS pages, confirms engine instruments, and tidies the cockpit like a good habit after a storm. The tanker rendezvous arrives like a small act of grace. She slides into position, watches the boom arc, and feels the light thud as fuel begins to flow. Breathing slows. Her gloved fingers find the folded checklist. A private reminder that order is a choice you make when the world forgets to offer it. As fuel climbs, memory returns to the near fratricide from years before. A grid felt wrong, and she paused to verify while others pressed. That pause prevented a friendly hit and wrote a lesson on her bones. Today she moved fast because she checked first, not because she ignored the book. Refuel complete. She calls off the boom and heads back on station for a quiet handoff. One last check on the platoon confirms that movement continues and the gap holds. Marines first and paperwork second does not mean breaking rules. It means following them so people get home. Competence feels like care. And the relief that follows a hard fight belongs to everyone who kept the details right. The fight leaves behind a hum that feels like the inside of your chest after a long run. If you love moving, uplifting stories, here is the quiet part that matters. Careful does not mean slow. It means the checklist and the readbacks make real speed possible when lives are on the line. Close air support is not about big explosions. It is about a Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller, owning the control type and the clearance. And a pilot flying precise geometry, so fragments move away from friendlies. Night and dust demanded Type 2, because the controller and the shooter could not both see. So talk on, and marks by infrared carried the picture. Gray dawn and red smoke allowed Type 1, because both the controller and Major Aaron Checklist Carter had visual, which made a tighter call safe. Danger close is never casual. It carries the commander's initials and a promise to protect the Marines who are within meters. Headings, offsets, and a west egress kept debris north of the wadi and away from the platoon as they bounded by pairs. Hold this truth and bring it home. When everything feels noisy, find your checklist. Confirm what matters. And act with care. Courage is not loud. It sounds like IP inbound at the right time. Cleared hot only when it is safe. And rounds that walk away from your own people. Competence is a kind of kindness. A steady hand that brings others home and lets them breathe again. Thank you to the Marine Rifle Platoon from 1st Battalion 7th Marines. To Staff Sergeant Michael Herrera, the Marine Joint Terminal Attack Controller. And to the aircrew community that flies the A-10C Thunderbolt II. Your calm work in dust and doubt gave this story its heart. What you heard here follows real United States close air support practice that crews live every day. 9-line briefs. Type 2 at night and in heavy dust. Type 1 at gray dawn, when both sides have visual. Danger, close with the commander's initials. Final attack headings that bias fragments away from friendlies. And careful egress planning to steer clear of threats. We keep the language simple and human so listeners who love moving and uplifting content can stay inside the moment. If you want to learn more, stay with us as we unpack how pilots and controllers build a shared picture without losing sight of the people on the ground. We will do it without breaking immersion and without turning procedures into noise. The goal is clarity that honors service and keeps families in mind right now. Here is a gentle call to action that respects the chain of control, where the Joint Terminal Attack Controller owns the type and the clearance, and the pilot executes with discipline and restraint. Subscribe if you want more. Share this with someone who cares about those who serve. And comment the words, "cleared hot," if you would like a clear breakdown of the differences between Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 using examples you can follow. Hold one last thought as we close. Competence is a form of care. Checklists are promises. And getting people home is the point.